Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today.
So if you want to read what's on the board, you might need to pin me, but I'll use words as well so that you don't have to if you want to see all the other people around. So my name is Caitlin. I started this work while I was still at university and as a youth worker. So I was mainly interested in how do you get groups of kids where not quite gangs, but there were groups of children who did not play together, didn't like one another, were prejudiced against each other. And I became very interested in what were some ways that I could support my teenagers that I worked with as a youth worker to get along better. And I'd studied NLP, and then I came across clean language. I went, oh, this is so easy, so easy. And it is so easy. And it's not, it's really hard because it's very simple. So I discovered clean language. I started to apply it with my teenagers, teach it with my teenagers, teach it to groups of teenagers. And what we're going to do this evening is we're going to do it a little bit like I did with them. So we're going to have an experiential go of clean. And then you, like they did, are going to start going, oh, how would it work with this? How would it work with that? Because that's how it happened. I just went, hey, groups of kids, come together. I'll ask you a question, you answer. I'll just use this stuff I've learned. And then very quickly, the kids learned how to use it back with me, then with one another. And then suddenly we were winning awards because our kids could do things that people wouldn't dream that they could do. So rather than tell you a lot about what it is, so what is a clean question? I'm going to do some first. So I'm going to need to change my view because I need to see you all. There you go. And I'm going to give you an instruction and you're going to answer. So you can just put your hand up. I'll have to put my glasses on so I can read your names. I'm going to give you an instruction. You're going to answer. I'll call on you, put your hand up. I'll get you to say your answer. And then I will use a couple of clean questions to find out what it is that you're thinking, find out a little bit about the way that you think. After a couple of goes, I'm going to stop and ask you all what I'm doing. I'll do it again. I'll ask you all what I'm doing. And the third time, I'm going to hope that some of you will start doing it with me. So then you'll start to be able to ask the questions. Once I'm sure that you can kind of do that, enough of you can do it, I'll go on to the main topic of this evening, which is I'm going to elicit a metaphor. I'm just going to show you a really basic use for clean questions. It's certainly not the only one. It's a fraction of what you can use them for. But one great use for clean questions is embodied metaphors that help us understand the way that we turn up at work. So we're going to do when you're working at your best, you're like what? We're going to do when you're working at your worst, you're like what? We're going to look at adapting it for Agile, and then there'll be some space for Q&A. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to give you no more introduction. We're just going to start. See an elephant. What kind of elephant is it? When you're ready, just raise your hand. So see an elephant. Edward.
I see a gray shape with kind of sticking out ears.
It's a gray shape with sticky out ears. That's not mine, is it? Oh, it is. And a gray shape with sticky out ears. And when it's a gray shape, is there anything else about that shape?
I'm seeing smaller eyes.
So smaller eyes, a gray shape and sticky out ears. Whereabouts is that gray shape?
I'm seeing grassland around it.
So Edward's got grassland, it's got sticky out ears, it's a gray shape and smaller eyes. Whose elephant's different? Is that Meenakshi?
Hi, yes, my elephant is brown and has a calf.
So Meenakshi's is brown and it has a calf. What kind of calf is it?
A young one.
So it's a young one. And whereabouts is that young calf?
Right next to the mother.
And it's right next to the mother. and it's a young one and it's right next to the mother. And is there anything else about that elephant and that calf that's right next to that mother?
No, it's kind of grasslands, except it's an Indian elephant, so it's not very large ears.
So that's a not very large ears Indian elephant. And what's one more? So whose elephant's different again? Yep, Vicky.
Yeah, my elephant is next to people trying to raise a circus tent. It's got a hide that is slashed and it looks like it's suffered a lot of trauma, and people are poking at it with a hook.
So people are poking at it. It looks like it's suffered trauma.
Yep.
And they're raising
a tent, a circus tent.
They're raising a circus tent. And when there are people poking it, what kind of people are those people poking that elephant?
There are people who are trying to get some work done, and they expect the elephant to be able to do that work.
And when it looks like it's experienced trauma and there's a slash, is there anything else about that slash?
It's healed over, but there are varying degrees of healing.
Great. So if I just freeze there for a minute, what are you noticing? What differences are you noticing about your elephants? Or their elephants? What differences are you noticing? You'll have to shout out.
They're in different contexts.
Yep.
Situations.
It's different situations, different contexts. Any other differences?
Even though there's a varying level of detail, they become more detailed as you ask questions.
Yeah. So some of them, there seems to be more detail already, but there's more detail as we ask. Yep.
Different color.
Different colors. So I'm going to call this thing, they've got some different attributes. As a sort of general, the different colors, and that different context, I'm going to say context or location.
They have different relationships.
Yeah. What kind of different relationships have you noticed?
Mother and child, worker or employee and employer, or aggressor and being aggressed.
So some of the elephants are just elephants and others, they're in relationship to something else. Yeah. Okay, let's get a couple more. And this time, pay attention to what I'm doing, because remember, this is your second go. So your third go, I'm going to be asking you to be me. So whose elephant's different again? I need another elephant. Yeah, Caitlin?
When I picture this elephant, I picture one that I would see at the zoo, and it's walking past, so I see the full length of the elephant. I see its trunk curled up, but it's kind of just like what I would draw out, like a clip art or something. I don't imagine it like real.
So, like you'd see it at the zoo, and like it going past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but not real, like a clip art elephant.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And when it's like a clip art elephant and it's like one that you would see at the zoo, is there anything else when it's like clip art?
It's in motion. It's like walking past, and it's doing something with its trunk and its ears.
And it's in a motion.
It's in motion. Yeah.
Yes, in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's doing something with its trunk and its ears. It's great. And whose elephant's different again?
So my elephant was brown as well, but it was in a context of, I mean, the moment you even said see an elephant, you know, randomness of it as it was, I just pictured the elephant in a kind of an empty environment, the way you do when you're doing animation work. So it would be in a gray empty field, but then as the elephant was shaped more, I started kind of zooming into its trunks, like they were big, and there is more environment shaping around it at that point. But it was interesting to see how it was a process, as in first the elephant appeared and then more details around it started shaping up.
So first the elephant, then more details around it as it's shaping up.
Yep, and think like National Geographic kind of context, as in middle of safari or something like that, kind of yellowish. dried grass.
And at first, in a space like for animation.
Yes, at first there wasn't a completely, there was nothing around it. So it was just in a, like you would when you're manipulating digital assets, you had an elephant just thrown in a blank gray, it was blank gray. It was just the elephant as it was, without anything around it.
And then as the details filled in, is there anything else when the detail is filled in like that?
I'm not sure I follow the question.
Yeah, it's because it's not the one I wanted to ask. I want to ask another one, but I'm trying to limit them because I want you to take over from me. So as the details filled in, and it's a National Geographic kind of elephant, then what happens?
Kind of ends there, really, because we kind of got into the conversation. Then I just started picturing other people's elephants as they described them. But I mean, that's as far as I got, really.
That's as far as you got.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what am I up to, people? What am I doing or not doing?
You're not making assumptions.
How do you know?
Okay. The way you frame questions does not sound like it's coming from a place where you've made an assumption. You're asking for input without being judgy.
Okay, so I'm not making assumptions, asking for input without being judgy.
You're repeating back what you hear, presumably to get confirmation.
Okay.
Displaying
So
curiosity.
Say that one again.
Displaying curiosity.
So how am I displaying curiosity?
You have a
Asking questions.
Yeah, I'm asking questions.
You're asking questions about the surroundings and about the attributes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
The
so I am
questions
asking
are,
questions.
the questions are open-ended, both in the structure and in the tone of voice.
So anything else about the tone of voice?
When I hear your voice, not only do I hear the audible book, but I also hear yeah, a genuine inquisitive tone to your voice.
Okay.
And it sounds matter of fact.
Yeah. There's a matter of fact tone. I've never, yeah, I don't know how to describe that as an evidence-based thing. And right now we're talking about elephants. But this is also the same kind of tone that I use if I'm asking executives about their decision-making strategies, or if I'm doing conflict resolution, I go, okay, and they'll say, you know, I'm absolutely split in two. And you go, what kind of split? When you split in two, whereabouts is that split? It's an inquiry into the stuff, but it's difficult. It's not neutral. So yeah, it is matter of a fact, but I'd love some other descriptions of it would be great for me.
You are validating their experience without engaging with it.
Okay.
So whatever they're feeling, you're acknowledging that is what they're feeling or that is what they're seeing, but you're just inquiring on it. You're not putting yourself into that visualization or that feeling.
You are reflecting.
I'm reflecting, I'm validating without engaging. Ronka, was that you wanting to speak there?
And also you were trying to get different perspectives.
So what am I doing? So as I'm trying to get different perspectives, how am I trying to do that? Like, what am I doing to try and do that?
Does anyone else have a different, what other kinds of elephants are you seeing? What's your own views on what I've just said? So you're saying something and so many other people are seeing it in different contexts. We're all hearing the same thing, but we are picturing it differently.
Yeah, so I'm asking who's different.
Yeah.
What are the questions you've heard me ask so far?
Like how, you're asking words like, how is it? What is it? So you're very, very, it's not a yes or no answer. It's more, you have to explain, you have to give more detail. So they're not close-ended questions.
They're not close-ended. trapped myself into asking an extra one, but I should have only asked 4 so far. Can anyone pick?
There's
What kind of?
Okay, so one of them is about if I want to get attributes. I've been asking what kind of. Yep. And any other questions?
Whereabouts is something. Location, yeah.
Or what's around it, what's near it.
Yeah, so whereabouts or where? I'll have asked one of those 2 questions. It's funny, it depends on which language, because I teach in around the world with different languages, but let me just check the difference between those 2 questions with you. So just imagine an apple for a moment. If I ask you, where is the apple? Or whereabouts is the apple? What's the difference between those 2 questions just for you?
It changes it from being on a tree branch to being in Lancashire.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. I was going to say where sounds extremely specific, whereas whereabouts is a little bit more open to allow people to add whatever they want.
So for some people, where is specific and whereabouts is more general and they can do what they want. Is anyone the opposite way around?
I think I just proved I was.
Yeah.
To me, they're both the same. It makes no difference.
Yeah, same for
Some
me.
people-
Makes no difference for me. Whereabouts, where? You just want to know where it's at.
Yeah.
One of them strikes
Whereabouts-
me.
Sorry.
One of them strikes me as a little more unsure, like not in a bad way. But if I say where, it almost implies I want some specificity. And the whereabouts is more like you're kind of groping or unsure and you're inviting. One's a little more inviting, I would say, to me.
For me, whereabouts includes all the surrounding. So where is like the pinpoint of the apple? It is on the desk. Whereabouts, it's in the other room. You know, like it's the whole environment.
So just be aware that even separating these 2 questions for some people, so for me, I'm the opposite to Sid. If you ask me where something is, that's a general location. If you ask me whereabouts, that to me means pinpoint for me in that general location where it is. So all I do know is it's useful to have both of them because they're great to follow up. So if you say, if somebody says, oh, I just know it, and you say, where do you know it? They say, my heart, and you say, whereabouts in your heart, then it's, it's right in the core of me. But you can do it the other way around, whereabouts is it in my heart? Where in my heart? They're just useful. So whereabouts, what kind of, any other questions you've heard me ask?
Is there anything else?
Yeah. So is there anything else about? So is there anything else about whatever?
I'm not sure if I'm cheating here, but what happens then?
Yeah, that was the one I caught myself out with. What happens next?
What
When
happens
somebody's
next?
got a process, yeah, what happens next? So this would be a sequence. And so if you think about the questions, they're designed, they're not really questions. They say, give me more information in this kind of class. So give me more attribute-y information, or give me more location-y kind of information. Give me more sequence-y kind of information. So I could, this is a power outage. I can hear everyone's burglar alarms going off now. So what happens next? Okay, so I'll do one more and then it's all of your job to do the next one. So I need one more elephant, please. Who have we not heard from yet?
Mine was somewhat similar to others. It was from the side, gray, trunk up, and both with the elephant and the apple. I didn't think anything about where it was or location. I only saw the thing you asked about specifically.
So only saw the thing that I asked about specifically, and it's trunk up and to the side.
I saw the whole side of the elephant.
And what kind of elephant is it? You see the whole side of it and you just see what you were told to see. What kind of elephant is it?
It was a big gray elephant.
And it's bigger than gray, and it's got its trunk up. Is there anything else about that elephant with its trunk up?
Just seemed excited.
Seemed excited. What kind of excited?
Like it was happy where it was going.
Mm-hmm. So there's just a simple example of, you know, and I could also ask him where. I could say, when he seemed excited, where did it seem excited? Throw in that one. So Stephen, where did it seem excited?
That's hard for me to answer. It's because where can be location or yeah, I don't know how to answer that one.
And when it's, I might just try one more. When it's excited about where it's going, where is it going? And just everyone else, when you use a clean question, you throw them out. There is no, absolutely, you know, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. There is no way of knowing if it's going to be a good question or not. The only thing you can be sure of when you ask a clean question is that you didn't taint it with your own stuff. That you simply asked for him to, you accepted whatever he said and you extended it, you asked him to extend it, but they might not know the answer to your question. And you've got to be really okay with just going, oh, okay, that wasn't good. I'll go on to something else. I might even stop asking clean questions for a bit, or I might ask a few more. I might just go in a different direction. So there's no way, even at this level, there's no way I'll know whether the question will land well until I've started to understand the other person a little bit more.
Glad I could provide the example for you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Okay, so with the next one, you're going to actually, shall I get, yeah, I want to just make sure a couple of you can ask the questions. So what we're going to do is I would like one more person to share their elephant, just share us a little bit, and then we'll see how many questions we could generate about it. So who's got another elephant?
Okay, so I had, when I pictured an elephant, I only saw the head from the front, and it was brown. And I don't know what kind, maybe an African elephant.
So Sid sees that, saw the head from the front and it's brown, maybe an African elephant. So what are all the questions? So Sid, don't answer any of these questions. We're just going to generate them. So what's a question? So I saw the head from the front and it's brown, maybe an African elephant. What's the clean question that we could ask Sid?
Is there anything about the head?
Yep. Is there anything else about the head? Great. Who's got another one?
Whereabouts was the elephant?
Yep. So she only saw the head. Whereabouts was that head? Whereabouts is that elephant? Yep. What's another one?
How did the elephant appear?
Now, it's not absolutely one of the clean questions, but how did the elephant appear? I figure if we've just said to her, see an elephant, then the question, how did the elephant appear? I think that's clean enough. You know, it's just another word for what does it look like? So, yep, how did that elephant appear? We'd accept that. Great.
Happening with the head.
What's happening with the head? Yep, clean enough.
How big was the head?
How big? So, yeah, there is another clean question that sort of goes between these. It says, does it have a size or a shape? Yep. So how big was the head? Great. Okay, so in a minute.
Could you also ask if it's why African?
Now, why is a fantastic question in this mix. So let's just check it out. So if I were to ask any of you who've said either it's got small ears or big ears, why is it African or why is it Indian? What's interesting about that question? How does that question land?
It goes from being inquisitive to interrogative.
How come?
Because now I'm being questioned on what I'm seeing, as opposed to being asked about what I'm like. As opposed to inviting more information, I'm being challenged.
So for some reason, we ask the why question a lot in life. I sometimes tell a story of when my youngest was he just started school, and he was having a little bit of trouble, or his teacher and he were having a little bit of trouble settling themselves together. And I went in to talk to her with him. And I said, I said, show me what kind of thing is going wrong. She said, well, for example, today, she turned to him and she said, why did you hit Isaac, Grover? He's your friend. And I said, is that what you ask him? And she said, yes. I said, does he answer? She said, no. So what is it about that question? So just again, you use a different context now. So why did you hit him? He's your friend. What is the why doing?
Trying to determine a reason.
Challenging values.
Challenge
assuming that there's a right and wrong answer.
Yeah. So why doesn't fit easily in the clean field? So what I did with my son is I said, give me a chance. I said, Grover, when you hit Isaac, what kind of hit was it? He said, it was a big hit in his face. I said, what happened just before he hit you? Sorry, just before you hit him. He said, oh, he pushed me. I said, what kind of push? He said, on my shoulder. I said, and what happened just before he pushed you? He said, oh, I pushed him. I said, all right. And what happened just before you pushed him? He said that my hair was a girl's hair. I said, okay. So Isaac said his hair was a girl's hair. He had beautiful long chestnut locks. He pushed him. Isaac pushed him back. He punched him in the face. And the difference between a clean question and a why question is quite cerebral and it's relational. It says, tell me, give me a reason now. Clean questions accept and extend what they've already said. It's a subtle difference, but I'm hoping you'll get the difference. It just says, so I can pull back to a why. What happened just before that? Where did that come from? I can pull back with a sequence, but it doesn't, you have to get there through adjacency. You can't force them to come to you.
It's yes and.
Caitlin, is it because the why is it requires interpretation? Like they have to interpret their purpose or the steps back to know that, oh, it was the source of this thing. Whereas if you just walk a person back through objective questions rather than interpretive, like why is like interpret the pattern for me already.
It's the relational. You have to, if I ask you a why question, you have to work out where did my why come from and satisfy my need. And that's the difference. Clean questions help people to create relationships with their stuff, but they don't bring you into them in a relational way. Is that Bobby?
Yes. At what point have we dug too deep? Is there a place where we finally get to, what did the molecule look like when it went in that direction? Do you know what I mean?
So the biggest rule of thumb is 2 questions.
Gotcha.
Generally, if you're learning, don't ask more than 3 questions. And again, it's to do with adjacency. So when I was first doing this stuff, I got it wrong. So for example, I had a startup and I had a group of 9 people around a table. And we said, if this organization, if this company was to go just the way I'd like it to be, this company would be like what? And one of the founders said, it would be safe. I said, what kind of safe? He said, something that I'd feel secure. Something that I could stand behind. I said, when you stand behind, is anything else when you stand behind like that? Oh yes, then it's like nobody could get to me. And nobody could get to you and you'd be safe. And when you're safe and nobody could get to you, is there anything else when nobody could get to you? Yeah, it's like I'd be shielded. And when you're shielded, anything else about the shielded? What kind of shielded? Oh, like sandbags. And by the time I've asked 3, 4 questions, the next question that I asked, I said, and when the sandbags, is there anything else about those sandbags? They're the ones I hide behind. Do you know what? He didn't want to share with me that he used to hide behind things because I didn't know any better. I did just used to pull back. I hadn't asked Bobby's question properly yet. And he said, yeah, when I was bullied at school, I used to literally hide behind the sandbags. And I want my company to be somewhere where I feel safe, somewhere where people aren't allowed to bully each other. Now, it so happened in that context, I got away with it, but I got away with it because I happened to be in a psychologically safe group. But oh my goodness, that's not where I normally work. And so you better not be putting people in psychologically unsafe positions. And so I tend to say 2 or 3 questions for you to better understand what they're talking about, and then talk normally again. It's 2 or 3, talk normally. But once you're skilled, then you want to ask questions until you've got a decent model. And then again, you wouldn't pull back, but you'd say maybe a little bit of this, a little bit of that, what happens just before, what happens next. So the thing we're going to go on to is where you're trying to get a model for something. But I'd say still never more than 3 questions deep on one thing. Otherwise it's weird as well. Like you haven't got a psychological contract to go around inquiring into people's subjective experience.
Hey, Caitlin, do you answer this question any differently if it's a group versus an individual?
No, I'd say it's the same. Until you're skilled, I just think it's weirder in a group. People will think you're weird. If you do it individually, those questions can slide in so subtly that the other person might not notice. But then again, you better have a good contract for doing that to somebody. Think of the adjacency again. The first thing that guy shared with us was safe. Safe was what he publicly was happy to share. The first question was adjacent, the answer was adjacent to that. It was just next to what he was happy to share publicly. The next answer was a one away. The next one, he may not have known that that's what was going to come. And so I've now caused him to share in public something which he didn't necessarily choose to. I used my attention to pull him there. So still, whether that was one-to-one or in a group, I'd be cautious.
Could I add one quick thing? By the way, hi, Caitlin. For an Agile group, to me, there's a corollary here to the 5 whys, right? That if you go 5 levels deep, you get really close to the core of what's going on. And that to me is kind of another sign that, 2, 3, past that, people might start saying, hey, you're not my therapist. What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks.
And obviously, if you've got a group that really wants to know all that stuff and you've been hired and they paid you lots of money for it, then you might take them a little bit deep. But I would make sure that I would get some good training behind you before I would go and do that. Okay, but you're going to go and practice now. And we're going to practice it really, really simply. So I'm going to get Jessica to send you away in a minute. She's going to send you away in 2s or 3s. And I'm just going to give you a different stimulus. This one is, when you're working at your best, you're like what? What is a word or a metaphor for you when you're working really well? And I'd like somebody to be a demo, and I'm going to send you away. Mike.
Yes. So when I'm working at my best, I'm like a tractor trailer rig. It takes me a minute to get up to speed, but once I get going, I just keep on trucking down the road.
Okay, great. So a tractor trailer takes me a minute to get going, but once I'm going, I'm just trucking on down the road. So what are some questions that, if you were in Mike's group, what are some questions we could ask him? Of any of these?
What kind of truck it is?
Yep, what kind of truck? Edward?
Whereabouts is that truck?
Yep. So whereabouts is the truck? What kind of truck?
Or whereabouts is that tractor trailer, to use the exact language?
Yeah, to use the exact language. Whereabouts is the tractor trailer? Yep.
What color is the truck?
What color is the truck? Now,
Well, that's not tangent though.
One. Yeah. Now, what's the difference? How come?
Is there anything else about truck?
Yep. Anything else about the truck or the tractor trailer? But how come what's this funny thing about color?
He injected something into the conversation that was less open-ended. You're asking him to think about an attribute as opposed to letting him just bring forward the important ones.
Yeah, it's similar with, how does that feel? See, if that tractor trailer is a kinesthetic metaphor. You might not know the color. It might just be a trucking on down sensation.
Right.
In the same way that if it was something that he visualized and you said, well, how does that trailer feel? Be like, what? Especially somebody like me who doesn't do feeling stuff. I'm like, what? Weirdo. It's not a feeling, it's a tractor trailer. You know, so it's some questions force people to speak the language that you think in rather than the language that they think in. So how does that feel? What color is it? What does that look like? We tend to see whether we can work out what they think. Yep. So Mike, let's just answer a couple of those. So anything else about that? Oh yeah, where is the tractor trailer?
It's on a wide open interstate highway, 6 lanes out into the wide open road.
And of course, the bit I'm really interested in.
How fast do you go?
Yeah. How fast does it go? Is it, again, it's not clean. It's a little bit dirty. It's got, but it's also humorous and it fits the logic of the metaphor. Yeah, it doesn't take us away from it. So I would let that question go. How fast do you go, Mike?
As fast as the law allows, give or take.
So you can go
unless
as fast.
I'm going down a hill, then I got to go faster to keep my momentum.
Now, so when it might take you a minute to get going, I might ask a non-clean, but an evidence-based question. I might say, what would we see or hear when you're taking a minute to get going? Or I could just stay completely clean. I could say, is there anything else when it takes you a minute to get going, Mike? Is there anything else when it takes you that minute?
You want me to answer?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So when it takes me a minute to get going, my thoughts are not always organized and my enthusiasm is not quite as vibrant. Once I get going, then my enthusiasm picks up and I'm more organized and I can carry on.
Great. Holger?
Yeah, what about the question where this truck is going to? Is it a clean question or?
I think it's clean enough. Trucks, it's again, it's a little bit like how fast do you go? It's the logic of the metaphor. So I think you can say, where's the truck going to? He might go, it's not, that's a weird thing. It might be too far outside of it, or he might tell you. So let's do one more quick demo and I'm going to send you away. I'm really going to encourage you to be as clean as you can. So I want one more person to be a demo. Somebody put their hand up. Edward, is that you? Yeah, Edward.
And if you could ask the question again, just so I can.
When you're working at your best, you're like what?
When I'm working at my best, I'm inspired by the mission I'm working for.
Okay. So inspired by the mission I'm working for. Those are your data points. That's all you've got so far. I'm inspired by the mission I've started talking to you. I'm working for.
Yeah, working towards, that would be easiest.
Working toward. Yeah, I'm inspired by the mission I'm working towards. Which of those words is going to really help you to understand how this guy works? What's the word that's really going to help you? What do you want to know about?
Mission.
The mission?
Mission.
Inspired.
Inspire.
Okay. So go for one first and then go for the other. So, what kind of mission, anything else about that mission? When you're inspired, where are you inspired? As much as you can, words that can be embodied, it'll help you compare and contrast his inspired from yours. Try and get things out of the cerebral and into the specific to this person. So we might say, Edward, when you're inspired, where is inspired? Or
inspired is a feeling I have that's drawing me forward to create something.
So now we've got all sorts of new data points. There's a drawing, there's a feeling, and it's drawing me forward. That's what inspired me to ask a metaphor question. It's drawing me like what? But first of all, let's just get you to go away in 2s and 3s and have a practice. So I'm going to put into the chat the starting question. And it's when you're working at your best, you're like what? And I'd like you to each ask at least one question each, then move on to the next person, one question each, move on to the next person. You're just going to go away for 6 minutes. Jessica, is that okay? You okay to send people away? Yep.
Or
Mike,
if you could post that in the chat so that for anyone that's on phone, because the chat will be deleted as soon as they move to the breakout room.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm just, for some reason, it went privately to Jeremy only. There you go. When you're working at your best, you're like what? Okay, so you're going to go away with for 6 minutes and have a go. If for any reason you find there's nobody in your room except you, come back to the main room and we'll send you somewhere else.
And Caitlin, you said just go around each asking a question of the others.
Yeah.
So just keep moving around, asking the person about their metaphor or their
one, yeah. So each person should get one or two, should get 2 or 3 questions, then go on to the next person, then go on to the next person. So
okay.
Keep switching focuses. There's about 2 minutes per person.
Also, sorry.
Yeah.
When you don't have a metaphor, how do you proceed?
Oh, you don't have to have a metaphor. I don't think Edward's particularly metaphorical. He's just inspired. So you just, we are equal opportunity employers of information. So we will take words, we will take metaphors, we'll take concepts, we'll take, you know, we've had this before where someone said, oh, when I'm at my best, I'm sort of, you go, what kind of a is that? You know, when they're at the worst, they're like, And you know, if that's what you get, you better work with it. It's your job to work with their stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we'll send you away now. Great, thank you. Those of you who just pinged yourself back, how did you get on with the questions that you were asking? Jess Jag, how did you get on?
I'd say we got on fine. There was just 2 of us. So I think we struggled a little bit. Well, at least I struggled a little bit with the example because I didn't have a metaphorical response. And so I think I wasn't really sure. I guess I wanted to understand what I was supposed to be trying to find out from the person beyond. I don't know. I felt it a little bit. I was a little confused.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I worked with Jess and I gave her my response, but I found it difficult to explain the what to her.
One of the ways with Clean, because they don't have any agenda in that sense, you really have to be clear about yours. And sometimes, you know, I could make you be clearer, but I kind of want you to shuffle around with it. So I want you to feel how, you just send them out there, but like, what are they for? So if you're gonna do this exercise with colleagues, I would be thinking to myself, so what? So what if Jessica is a woman on fire? What difference does that make to me if I've got to work with her? So how do I ask a question to find out what is it like to work with this person? How will she be or he be different to me? How will they respond in a way that's not my way of responding? So let's just switch. Yeah, let's check. Are there any other questions or comments just to come out of that before I just switch you to something else?
More question about the context where this can be employed. So I want to address Miroslav's question first. Or I'd like to hear an answer to Miroslav's question first, which is in the chat.
Thank you. I have a question because I had a client and he was answering too long. I was not able to remember all what is there. So I just choose only small part of this and it was not complete. And I was stressed, client was stressed, everybody was, concept was completely collapsed. So what to do?
Yeah, I interrupt a lot. So because if I've got to work with it, if I'm going to work with this stuff to understand them, I might interrupt them or I let it wash over me.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of then I say something like, and when that's what you're like at your best, you're like what? Like, and I just come back in with a little metaphor question, you know, just towards the end to try and get it more succinct for me. Or if like with live clients, I'll just stop. Obviously, I don't normally get metaphors. Metaphors are just a byproduct of what I do. But I might stop them and say, I'm just going to hold you for a minute. So what I've got so far is there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this. And then I'll let them continue so that I'm in control of it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Was there any other metaphor?
I actually have another question that comes out of that, which is when you're working with particularly people, and I say this as someone who is neurodivergent myself, but when you're working with people with neurodivergence, particularly those that have ADHD, where they need to get everything else out at once, because if they're interrupted, then they lose it completely. What is a good strategy for allowing them to be completely heard and feel they're being completely heard while still being able to ask the kinds of questions you want to ask?
Not dissimilar, but the other way. That's somebody where if that's part of their process, part of their way of thinking, is I need to have the whole thing out. I'd let them have the whole thing out, and then we'll need to sort of muddle our way through to a way that my system can handle their system. So that is probably one where I'd let them get the whole thing out and then say, and when it's, and maybe use 3 or 4 keywords, and when it's X, Y, and Z, that's like what? And get that into something that's more manageable for me.
And if they then accuse you of not listening, what would it, or rather like asking them to repeat themselves, what would be the next step there?
I see, it's rarely happened to me.
Okay.
I don't, because I do, because all of the keywords will be their exact words. So people tend to, if there's one thing that this process does, is it has people think that you're listening to them.
Okay.
In your response, though, you also didn't ask them to repeat. You asked them for a metaphor, which then gets them to explain more. So
yeah,
it's not.
I'm trying to do another level.
Right.
Yeah.
But not, yeah, I wouldn't ask them to do the same question twice. Let's give you a slightly different stimulus. Let's try again. So this time, what about when you're at your worst? When you're working at your worst, you're like what? And this time, in terms of the purpose, your purpose is to find out what would it be like to work with this person when they're at their worst, and what could you do about it? That's your background agenda to your clean questions. So when you're at your worst, you're like what? Who's happy to be a demo? Mike, is that you happy to be a demo?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
So when I'm working at my worst, I'm like an petulant child.
So I'm like a petulant child. So what should we ask him? And for what purpose? What do you want? What should we ask him? Yep.
Dig into why a petulant child is not good, or I think dig into what's hurting him with that child.
How about what kind of petulant child? What about it?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I want to bring in here to another clean concept is your job is not to side with Mike against his petulant child. Your job is to be an equal opportunity employer of the system. It's a system process, not a relational process. This is why it's quite funny as a coaching tool, because if you decide that the petulant's not good, then the petulant is unlikely to speak to you, or to, it's your job to just be there and go, oh, and it's a petulant child. What kind of petulant is the petulant of that child? Yeah, so it's, you accept and extend the characters as well as the words. You don't get to side against them, because even when we're at our worst in our system, they're doing something for very good reasons, and they'll tell you best about themselves if they think that they're welcome at the party. Does that make sense? Holger?
Yeah, I'm wondering, for example, a question like what childish actions or how it demonstrates this as a question.
So what are the childish actions, or how does it demonstrate? It's just a little bit less adjacent. It's just a couple of moves away. And what I really want you to practice, if there's one thing you could take away from this, is just ask 1 or 2 absolutely adjacent questions. So what kind of, we can try. So Mike, what kind of petulant?
A 2 or 3 year old child who's unhappy and pitching a fit.
So pitching a fit, unhappy, and when petulant, where is petulant?
Petulance is both here in my heart and here in my brain. There's something that's bothering me that I can't accept, and I'm rebelling against it.
So just by asking them what kind of and the where, if you do nothing else, just those 2 questions, you can start to get the system to better understand its own model. And that's then you can find out a little bit, 2 or 3 absolutely clean questions, then have a conversation about it. Is that Taroko?
Yeah, I would ask, what triggers that? What happens to trigger that?
Okay, so trigger is obviously it's a metaphor. So like, because it's a trigger. It won't hurt anything if you ask that, but if you just ask what happens just before, or where does that petulant come from? So what happens just before petulant? This is a sequence back or sequence forward. What happens next, or then what happens? But if you use the word trigger, it probably won't bother people too much. But the clean is to try and get your metaphors out of the picture.
No, I have a question actually for this process. I mean, let's maybe look at it from a different standpoint, because word choice matters clearly at this point, just to see the reactive section of when the next answer comes out. So it could actually affect the outcome. And initially we're going after the core. So I imagine would this process be more optimal if there was a word choice dictionary that is more applicable for someone? So let's say that specific user had a studied set of words to which they react more neutral to, say, than someone else would, because maybe someone doesn't react the same way for the same word than someone else does. So I wonder if it's more effective to have a pool of words that is for that person rather than a generic one.
The thing with this, again, I don't know how you guys work, but I wouldn't be able to remember those. Like I wouldn't be able to learn word pool choices for different people. I do know, obviously with people I work very closely with, my business partner, I know which words are very important for them. But you're more likely to do here is when you're learning this, you'll go for the words that suit your system, not the words that suit theirs. We're very, very poor at thinking about the logic of what they've said. We're very good at going, that resonates with me, therefore it must be important to them. So the first couple of questions you ask will be because of the sense you're making of it. If you can stay clean and ask one question of each of the words, that will help you get a model. I'll just show you, let's get one more demo. So who else is happy to be in a demo? When you're at your worst, you're like what? Yeah, Edward, you happy?
I mean, I'm happy to be a demo. Yes.
So when you're at your worst, you're like what?
When I'm at my worst, what I'm making is actively going to be limiting other people's choices.
So when I'm at my worst, I'm actively limiting other people's choices. So that's our data points, actively limiting other people's choices. So I would just put one clean question to each of those. Who's happy to do one?
What kind of limiting?
That's this one.
Whereabouts are the people you're affecting?
Yeah, actually, Edward, why don't you answer these ones? Let's see. So what kind of limiting for the first one?
By limiting their choices, I'm hurting them because they don't have the agency that they should have.
Okay, so he's hurting them by they don't have the agency they should have. The next question that somebody asked you was, what kind of other people?
Those that are impacted by what I'm working on.
Okay, so actively limiting other people's choices. So you've got actively and choices left. What can you ask?
What kind of choices?
with whatever I'm working on, that is limiting them.
Right, last one.
What's happening just before actively occurs?
I've been told to do it.
Ooh. It's a whole other area of the clean field. But it's like, okay, now he's passive to the demand of somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Not responsible for his bad behavior. Okay, so I need to tidy up because we have a hard finish. So what could you do? These are, I've given you a couple of topics, which is working at your best, working at your worst. In Agile, what would be a different topic that you could imagine doing with this stuff that would be useful to ask people about?
I think doing this with a group of people as they're learning how to work with each other and become a team is incredibly helpful.
Any other questions that you could ask? So besides what you like about working at your best, what you like working at your worst, any other questions that you could ask a team that was learning to work together?
How about if they're a Scrum team, when a sprint goes well, it's like what?
Yeah. So when a sprint goes well, a going well sprint is like what? Yep. So you can get a metaphor for sprint for this individual and then maybe a whole team metaphor. Yeah. What's another one you could do?
When you're in a great team, what would that great team feel like, or what would it be like?
Yeah. And if
what would a great team feel like, or what would it be like for you
now,
when you're working in a great team? Yeah.
If you hear, so Ronke, is that how you say your name?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So if she says, what does a team feel like? I'm like, So feeling is probably important to this system. Yeah, this individual will have feelings because if you ask for them, you've probably got them. That's what we like to say. But yeah, that's a great, so a great team for you is like what?
Better to say what would be a great team for you to work in be like.
Yeah. And especially if you can do the individual working at your best and then the team. So working at your best, working at your worst, and then a team, that gives you a nice triangle to go, oh, okay, this is why a team like this is good for me because it allows me to do more of this and less of that. Usually, you know, a good team for you should have you at your best more. Meenakshi?
Thank you, Caitlin. My question is, so we have retrospectives, right? And let's say they often say have less meetings or have shorter meetings. Then would it be okay to use that as one of the discussions and say, what would it look like when we have less meetings? Or would that be too scoping the question too fine?
No, so when we have less meetings, that's like what? But what you'll also need to add in here is what will we see and hear? Because a lot of the issues that go on is that we end up operating out of inference. So what we see and hear, what will that give you? You're going to need to expand those questions out and what needs to happen before we have shorter meetings. Yeah. And also sometimes it is worth having a longer meeting to get some learning going because then we have much shorter meetings.
Right.
Yeah. So my business partner and I, we've spent time modeling out our stuff because it does mean that when something goes wrong, it doesn't take us hours to get over it now. We can take an issue and unpack it in minutes because we've done this work. So you might do a longer meeting for a bit to understand each other, and then you can have shorter meetings. So I'm going to hand back. So the only thing I'm setting you away with is please just practice for the next couple of days, absolutely rigorous, no more than 2 fully clean questions and see what happens. And even if you don't ask them out loud, ask them in your head. It'll teach you to pay attention to the other system better. But I'm just going to hand back to Brittany now.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. That was incredible. I think everyone here really enjoyed that. And thank you all for hopping on today for our first lunch session. Typically, we meet the first Monday of every month in the evening. But thank you so much, Caitlin, for taking time out of your evening to make this work. This was amazing. And a reminder that we have Keep Austin Agile remote conference on Friday, November 5th. So if you all are joining, see you there. If you are not familiar with it, check it out online, and I hope to see you there. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your Monday. Thanks, everybody. And thank you again, Caitlin.
Lovely, welcome. If you've got further questions, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm relatively chatty. So yeah, if you've got questions, then we can. And there's lots of free resources, so you don't have to do training. You can go Google resources in the Agile world. I think Andrea Chu has made some lovely resources that she's gathered stuff together that people can just use for free. So thank you for coming and playing with us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.